On February 18th, India and the United Arab Emirates signed the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement or CEPA, which is the first free trade agreement finalized by the Narendra Modi-led government since it came to power in 2014. The deal was negotiated in a record 88 days and will come into force from May. It aims at increasing the non-oil trade between the two countries to $100 billion in 5 years from $45 billion in 2021. The UAE is currently India's third largest trading partner and the second largest export destination after the US, while India is the UAE's second largest trading partner and the largest in terms of exports. The trade pact is expected to benefit around $26 billion worth of Indian products that are subject to 5% import duty by the UAE. The UAE will remove customs tariffs on nearly 80% of the goods, which account for 90% of India's exports to the Gulf nation by value. India expects CEPA to generate 10 lakh jobs across labor-intensive sectors such as textiles, gems and jewelry, leather, footwear, pharma, medical devices, and automobiles. Not just goods, CEPA also covers 11 service sectors and over 100 subsectors, which include business services, telecommunications, construction, tourism, nursing, finance, among many others. The agreement is wide in its scope and includes areas like government procurement, digital trade, and intellectual property rights. To protect the interests of domestic producers, India has kept items such as dairy, fruits, cereals, vegetables, tea, coffee, tobacco, footwear, petroleum, processed marble, among others, out of the trade pact. The trade deal has also provided a permanent safeguard mechanism which will protect exporters and businesses from both countries from any unwarranted surge in volumes of any particular product. The deal comes with stringent rules of origin conditions. At least 40% value addition has been mandated for most goods to avoid routing of products manufactured in third countries to India via the UAE. For the first time in a trade agreement, the CEPA provides for automatic registration and marketing authorization of Indian generic medicines in 90 days, once they are approved in any of the developed countries. India has given duty concessions on gold imported from the UAE, while Indian exporters will get zero duty access to the UAE market for jewelry. This assumes significance as the two countries account for over 16% of the global trade in diamonds, gold, and jewelry. India is looking to enter into a similar agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council during this year itself. Amityendu Palit spells out the larger importance of the deal beyond the trade aspect and explains how it marks a change in India's approach towards its international trade policy.
I would like to start off by saying that this particular CEPA, to my mind, marks a new beginning in India's external trade engagement. That if we go back over the last 7 to 8 years of India's external trade engagement, then what we see was basically a period of prolonged hesitation because India backed out from a large number of negotiations it was conducting at that point in time, including with Europe, Australia, Canada, and then eventually it walked out of the RCEP. So there was a view that India is becoming increasingly defensive and circumspect of free trade agreements. But this agreement with the UAE is going to change that perception very significantly. India is simultaneously in talks with United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Israel, the Gulf Cooperation Council, as you mentioned, and European Union. All of these countries are important economic partners for India. UAE has emerged as very significant for India in terms of startups that it has started hosting. The UAE, along with the other countries with whom India is negotiating FTAs right now, are also, broadly speaking, India's very important strategic partners. It's a political relationship, it's a geo-economic relationship. So India is evidently on course to crafting an FTA strategy which doesn't look at these trade agreements just from a trade perspective. The character of trade is increasingly becoming services-oriented, digital-focused. Now, to that extent, the UAE is probably one of those countries which is offering the kind of ecosystem support and environment which will very nicely fit into a large number of upcoming emerging areas that India envisages, including clean energy and critical minerals trade, and the overall repositioning of various critical supply chains. And the UAE can actually be a hub for that, including pushing India's economic linkages deeper with the African continent, as well as with Europe. So I think it's, to a very large extent, a win-win situation for India.
India had pulled out of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the world's biggest free trade deal, signed by 15 Asia-Pacific economies in November 2020, over worries that cheap Chinese imports would flood the Indian market, harming domestic producers. It also faced opposition from farmers, especially the dairy industry. India's manufacturing sector is less competitive in several categories when compared to many other Asian countries. India also wanted stricter rules of origin in RCEP. India's concerns are not misplaced. Analysis by a national daily showed that between FY11 and FY21, exports to 9 countries and 2 trading blocs with which India has trade agreements grew 36% to $62 billion, while imports from these countries grew 44% to nearly $75 billion, doubling the trade deficit to $11.8 billion from $5.8 billion in a decade. India is rushing to finalize mutually beneficial early harvest deals with the countries it is negotiating FTAs with. Such early harvest deals would exclude sensitive issues until a full-fledged FTA is finalized. While CEPA is a good start to help increase the integration of Indian producers with global supply chains, it does not make up for the negative effects of India choosing to sit out of the RCEP.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.